Welcome to the Kwibuka Podcast, written by Dr. Jean Damascene Bizimana, minister at Minubumwe, and recorded by Josue Ishema. After years of research, he has collected and compiled information on different actions that led to the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. In this segment, we will focus on the contribution of the Hutu Power political party in the preparation and execution of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. The genocide perpetrated against the Tutsis in 1994 is not an event that surprised Rwanda and humanity as a whole. This genocide is the culmination of the long political process involving Rwandan and foreign actors. Belgian colonization and the Catholic Church in particular introduced stereotypes of categorizing Rwandans according to ethnicities that did not exist as such. Rwandans who were educated in Catholic schools and seminaries grew up with this ideological perception of their country's reality and failed to distance themselves from the logic of the colonizer to preserve the national unity and social harmony that were the heritage of our ancestors. Instead of maintaining cohesion and working for the integral development of the country, these so-called enlightened Rwandans made the discrimination of Tutsi the primary goal of their politics at all levels. The creation of the political party Parme Hutu by a group of intellectuals supported by the Catholic Church is a major event that must be considered to understand the process that led to the extermination of Tutsi in 1994. Indeed, Parme Hutu was an inherently racist party in both its essence and practices. No Rwandan who was not Hutu could be accepted as a member of this party. Such a political line inherently contains the seeds of genocide. President Kayibanda, who was also the president of Parme Hutu, implemented since 1957 the date of the drafting of the founding text of Parme Hutu, the Manifeste de Bahutu, a policy based on hatred of Tutsi and their exclusion. In Kayibanda's politics and his party Parme Hutu, Tutsi as a whole became scapegoats of the misfortunes that the Hutu allegedly suffered for decades, pretending to ignore that, in the history of Rwanda, the Tutsi monarchy had never carried out ethnic or collective massacres targeting a particular group. The Rwanda that the colonizer and the missionary found had both poor and rich upon their arrival. That Rwanda did not kill. It is therefore evident that the distant responsible for the genocide committed against the Tutsi in 1994 is the one who created a policy based on hatred of the Tutsi and introduced it as a regular political line. The Parme Hutu party and its founders are the primary culprits. In 1963, under the pretext that a group of Tutsi exiles from Burundi had attacked Rwanda from Bugesera, President Kayibanda's regime organized new massacres against the Tutsis in the country, especially in the prefectures of Kigali, Kibungo, Gitarama, Gisenyi, Ruhengeri, and Gikongoro. Observers present in Rwanda, researchers, and missionaries signaled that these killings met the necessary conditions to constitute the crime of genocide. The international press widely covered it. Kayibanda was overthrown in 1973 following a coup staged by General Juvenal Habyarimana, a military officer from the northern part of the country. He accused Kayibanda and his party, Parme Hutu, of having caused the division among Rwandans. Habyarimana made an enticing speech advocating for working towards the unity and development of all Rwandans. It should be noted that Habyarimana came to power in a bloodbath against the Tutsi, whom Kayibanda's regime had expelled from schools and positions in state institutions and private companies. Those who survived this carnage were once again forced into exile in foreign countries. In 1975, Habyarimana founded his political party, the National Revolutionary Movement for Development, MRND, with the motto, Peace, Unity, and Development. All Rwandans automatically became members of this party since it was a single party that received state funds for its operation. Despite the good intentions initially, Habyarimana quickly implemented a policy identical to that of his predecessor, Kayibanda. He established a so-called ethnic and regional balance system that enforced the limitation of Tutsi in schools and employment. He overly favored nationals from his native region who took the lion's share in all sectors of the country's life. Moreover, Habyarimana refused to address the issue of Tutsi refugees, the first of whom had been expelled from the country in 1959. His presidency was also characterized by a series of assassinations, independent journalists, and human rights defenders. Even those who denounced corruption suffered the same fate. On October 1, 1990, the Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, began an armed conflict against the regime with a clear goal of breaking away from the policy of exclusion and discrimination that had characterized Rwanda since 1959. This armed conflict became an opportunity for the regime to carry out mass arrests and systematic and widespread killings of Tutsi, especially in the northern region from which the president originated. Whenever the regime lost ground military against the RPF, it reacted by organizing killings of Tutsi civilians on an exclusively ethnic basis. The Arusha peace negotiations lasted 3 years from 1991 to 1993 and were supported by opposition parties, namely the PSD, MDR, PL, PDC, and other smaller parties such as PDI or PSR. Before the dissolution of these parties in 1993 through Habyarimana's maneuvers, they were convinced that the path of negotiations was the only possible way to solve the problem of war definitively. The Hutu Power movement pushed many members of opposition parties to adopt the extreme line. On the other hand, after consultations between the PSD, MDR, and PL parties with the RPF, the MRND intensified its efforts to infiltrate and divide members of these parties. On the other hand, the MRND sought to ally with other smaller parties or create new ones to show that political parties were supporting it. It was at this time that the collaboration of the MRND with the CEDER, Parirwa, or Republican Party of Rwanda, created on January 20, 1992, PECO, Ecological Party, founded on November 30, 1991, and PADER, Rwandan Democratic Party, founded on January 20, 1992, was publicly announced. These parties issued numerous communiques signed by their authorities condemning the Arusha peace negotiations. On the MRND side, the communiques were generally signed by its national president, Mathieu Ngirumpatse, or Amandin Ruyira, who was the MRND president in Butare and at the same time the first vice president at the national level. For the CEDER, they were signed by Martin Bucyana, its president, Jean-Baptiste Mugimba, secretary general, Misago Antoine Rutegesha, the second vice president, and sometimes Eli Nyirimbibi or Theoneste Nahimana. Nahimana, originating from Gisenyi, replaced Bucyana as the president of the CEDER after his death on February 23, 1993 in Butare. On the Parirwa side, most communiques were signed by Michel Nshimiyimana, treasurer of this party. For the PADER, they were signed by Jean-Baptiste Ntagungira, secretary general. Those of the PECO were signed by its president, Dr. Jean-Baptiste Putera. The alliance was named the Alliance for the Strengthening of Democracy, ASD. These political parties forming the ASD manifested themselves in joint actions with the MRND to sabotage the Arusha negotiations, which they called a civil coup d'etat by opposition political parties, thus designated the RPF, PSD, PL, and MDR. In general, the high authorities of the MRND wrote several letters conveying the ideology of genocide. These parties' ministers published some. Others were by the party's general secretariat. There were also communiques published by the leaders of the MRND at the prefectural level with the same ideology. The 9 ministers of MRND, namely Dr. Kazimir Bizimungu, Minister of Health, Pauline Nyiramasuhuko, Minister of Family and Women's Promotion, Augustin Girabatware, Minister of Planning, Prosper Mugiraneza, Minister of Public Service, André Nagerura, Minister of Transport and Communication, Calixte Nzabonimana, Minister of Youth and Cooperative Movement, James Gasana, Minister of Defense, Daniel Mbangura, Minister of Higher Education, Scientific Research and Culture, issued numerous communiques opposing the Arusha peace negotiations. In the October 15, 1992 letter addressed to the Prime Minister, These ministers from the MRND contested specific clauses of the agreement protocol between the Rwandan government and the RPF on the power sharing within an expanded-based transitional government. The first was the provision stating that the President of the Republic would appoint the Prime Minister without the prerogative to dismiss him. The second was related to the establishment of the Supreme Court. MRND ministers argued that it went against the independence of the judiciary. Finally, they contested the procedure for appointing high authorities in the country, especially the Prime Minister's prerogative to appoint high-ranking officials. On November 11, 1992, the same ministers addressed another letter to the Prime Minister in which they revisited the peace negotiation taking place in Arusha. They claimed that this negotiation favored the interest of the MDR, PL, and PSD parties. They contested the decision made in Arusha on October 30, 1992 regarding the agreement protocol between the Rwandan government and the RPF on power sharing within an expanded-based transitional government. They argued that this decision was contrary to the interest of the majority people and the nation. It is noteworthy that the ideology of the majority people reappeared, and it is known that this expression refers to the Hutu, which is indicative of the attitude of the MRND ministers who maintained, in their conception, the policy based on the ethnic affiliation of a part of the population qualified as the majority in the country. On November 12, 1992, the MRND, PADER, CEDER, PECO, and PAREDGOA parties issued a press release condemning the progress of the negotiations. They stated, "The proposals supported by the Rwandan delegation are not always based on the recommendations of the people." This communiqué also stated that the MRND, PADER, CEDER, PECO, and PAREDGOA parties will fight for transitional government leading to clear and transparent elections for the people to strengthen democracy. At that time, what the MRND and its allies called the people was solely the Hutu. In the Arusha negotiations, when the Rwandan delegation led by Minister Ngulinzira agreed to sign protocols that it deemed to satisfy the interest of all Rwandans, the MRND and its allies would stand up and claim that the people's interests were violated and that Ngulinzira had betrayed the country. In 1993, the hardliner trend of political parties such as MRND, MDR, PSD, PL, PDC, CEDER, and other minor parties created by the MRND built a coalition commonly known as Hutu Power. This coalition was officially launched during a meeting of the MDR party on October 23, 1993, by one of its leaders, Frodoir Karamira, the second vice president of the MDR at the national level. During this meeting, extremist members of the MDR, accompanied by those of the MRND and CEDER, gathered to express their outrage at the assassination of Ndadaye and draw lessons from it. The real purpose was to use the Burundian issue as another pretext to reject the Arusha Peace Agreement concluded on August 4, 1993. In his speech, Karamira vehemently attacked the RPF and more specifically, its military leader, General Paul Kagame, whom he accused of assassinating President Ndadaye and depriving the Burundian people of their democracy. Karamira urged all Hutus in Rwanda to unite and take necessary measures, falsely claiming that Kagame had similar plans for Rwanda to thwart peace and democracy. Karamira insulted Hutus of the MDR who were in favor of the Arusha Agreement, mentioning Faustin Twagiramungu, who was the president of the MRND and prime minister designated by that agreement, the incumbent Prime Minister Agathe Uwiringiyimana and Anastase Gasana, calling them Inyenzi, which translates to cockroaches and puppets of the Tutsi. In harsh words, Karamira called on the people to look for the enemy among us and not to sit saying that what happened in Burundi will not happen in Rwanda because the enemy is among us. Karamira incited the crowd by saying that Hutu working against Hutu solidarity were traitors who should also be considered enemies. He said, "We have clearly stated what to avoid fighting another Hutu. We have been attacked, and we must not attack ourselves. Let's avoid the invasion of the enemy who could steal our government." Karamira concluded his speech with now famous violent terms, stating, "Hutu Power MRND Power, CEDER Power, MRD Power. All Hutu are one power. The heated crowd repeated power after each slogan. Karamira did not act on his own initiative. He was executing a well-elaborated plan by the MRND and President Habyarimana to divide opposition political parties in order to find allies to unite against the implementation of the peace agreement and bury it definitively by preparing for the genocide against the Tutsi and the assassination of Hutu opposed to his oppressive regime. It should be noted that most politicians Habyarimana recruited to join the Hutu Power trend were not naive pawns. They had their own personal interest that he exploited by granting them very lucrative financial favors. This was the case for Justin Mugenzi, who allegedly received significant sums of money to pay off his bank loans and aligned himself with President Habyarimana's camp with his Liberal Party friends to split his party, which Habyarimana feared for its popularity as the only political party at the time that managed to bring together Hutu and Tutsi supporters, especially at its leadership level. After the creation of the Hutu Power trend within the political parties, the acceleration of the genocidal plan occurred through a general mobilization of the Hutu population sensitized to kill their Tutsi neighbors, labeled as their enemies. This information was known to the UN and Western embassies accredited to Rwanda. On November 5, 1993, Mark Nez, a Belgian intelligence officer within MINUAR, asserted that on that same day, President Habyarimana had led a meeting at his hotel, Rebero L'Horizon, during which it was decided to distribute grenades, machetes, and other weapons to the MRND's Interahamwe militia and the CEDER's Impuzamugambi. On January 16, 1994, a demonstration attended by many members affiliated with the Hutu Power ideology from Kigali and its surroundings was organized at the Nyamirambo Regional Stadium. During this meeting, Justin Mugenzi, who led the Hutu Power faction of the PL party, spoke and urged caution against Tutsis and Belgian soldiers from the UNAMIR. Many weapons were distributed to Hutu Power members of the MRND, CEDER, MDR, PSD, PDC, and PL parties during this meeting. This arms distribution was even confirmed on January 15, 1994, by the Belgian ambassador in a letter addressed to the Belgian Minister of Foreign Affairs, warning that weapons continued to be distributed to the Interahamwe and proposing that UNAMIR should be able to confiscate them. This was also noted by General Dallaire, who commanded the UNAMIR troops. In the letter he addressed on January 11, 1994, to the United Nations Security Council, his letter requested authorization to confiscate these weapons, but Kofi Annan, who headed the UNAMIR service, refused. On February 25, 1994, a significant meeting of Interahamwe leaders was held under the authority of its president, Robert Kajuga. During this meeting, it was decided to warn all Interahamwe to be highly vigilant towards Tutsis, especially those in Kigali, whose lists already existed. They were also instructed to be ready to take action using firearms and other instruments. Another recommendation was to act with the Impuzamugambi of the CEDER and members of the Hutu Power trend from the main political parties MDR, PSD, and PL. This union of forces matched that of the minor parties allied with the MRND, namely the PECO, PDI, PADER, RTD, MFBP, and PPGR. On the same date, February 25, 1994, the Association of Peace Volunteers, AVP, a Rwandan human rights organization, published a declaration denouncing the existence of a plan of massacres, the incitement to hatred broadcast by RTLM, listing victims of violence orchestrated by the regime, especially in Kigali, and issuing an urgent appeal of UNAMIR to put an end to this climate of state violence. On February 27, 1994, Interahamwe leaders, along with other senior officials of the MRND, including Michel Bagaragaza, Joseph Nzirorera, Augustin Girabatware, Claver Mvuyekure, Pasteur Musabe, Séraphin Rwabukumba, and Robert Kajuga, met at the Rebero Hotel and decided to create and finance a force tasked with exterminating the Tutsi. On March 15, 1994, The organizers of the International Commission on Human Rights Violations in Rwanda, including Human Rights Watch, the International Federation of Human Rights League, the International Center for Human Rights and Democratic Development, and the Inter-African Union for Human Rights and the Peoples, along with the Amnesty International, issued a statement deploring the escalation of violence in Rwanda, arms distribution, delays in implementing the Arusha Accords, and the MRND's attempt to obtain a promise of amnesty for those involved in human rights violation committed earlier. On March 30th, 1994, Colonel Tarsis Renzaho, prefect of the city of Kigali, sent a list of people, including reservists, to be part of a so-called civilian self-defense force to the Chief of Staff of the Army, Colonel Deogratias Nsabimana. However, civilian self-defense was a euphemism for the death squads of the MRND, SEDER, and other Hutu Power groups to exterminate the Tutsi and kill Hutu democratic opponents. Renzaho's letter followed a broadcast by Ferdinand Nahimana on March 28, 1994, in which he called for the population's self-defense, preparing for the final solution to what he called the Tutsi League, which, according to him, aimed to create a Hima empire in the countries that make up the Great Lakes region. The SEDER, Coalition for the Defense of the Republic, deserves in the mobilization for the genocide against the Tutsi. The idea of creating the SEDER emerged from various meetings held at the National University of Rwanda, Nyakinama campus, between 22nd October 1991 and 17th January 1992. These meetings brought together Hutu extremists from Ruhengeri and Gisenyi who were in the public administration, united by hatred of the Tutsi. This group called itself the Circle of the Progressive Republicans, led by Charles Ndereyehe Ntahontuye, originally from the former Cyabingo commune in Ruhengeri. He led the Agricultural Development Project in Gikongoro. On 22nd February 1992, a meeting to validate the structure of the SEDER party took place at the Urugwiro Hotel in Kigali, bringing together the 10 most extremist members who proclaimed that they were creating the Coalition for the Defense of the Republic, SEDER in French. In Kinyarwanda, they adopted the name Impuzamugambi Ziharanira Repubulika. These individuals who founded the SEDER are as follows: Bucyana Martin, Nahimana Theoneste, Misago Rutegesha Antoine, Mugimba Jean-Baptiste, Uwamariya Beatrice, Higiro Celestin, Nzaramba Celestin, Akimanenzani Emmanuel, Hitimana Athanase, and Simbizi Stanislas. These people will always be remembered for their distinguished role in the most abject malevolence, creating the extremist party that organized the genocide, claiming over 1 million lives between April and July 1994. The ideology of incitement to hatred against the Tutsi was notably expressed through several communiques published in 1992 and 1993, both during and after the signing of the Arusha Accords. Here are some examples. On September 2nd, 1992, the SEDER addressed a letter to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Boniface Ngudinzira, entitled SEDER Party's Requirement for its Participation in a New Transition Government, including the RPF. In this letter, the SEDER demanded impossible conditions from the minister, even resorting to threats. First, it required that all accredited parties entering the transitional government commit to defending the gains of the 1959 revolution. This so-called revolution established a regime based on discrimination that led to ethnic massacres, condemning a portion of Rwandans to exile. Most members of the RPF at that time were Rwandan refugees who had been expelled from the country following that revolution. Another condition the SEDER demanded was the minister to occupy the positions of the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, and Minister of Primary, Secondary and Higher Education. It added that Minister Ngudinzira would bear the consequences if its demands were unmet. On October 18, 1992, the SEDER released a statement to the same minister titled Message that the majority people have entrusted to the SEDER to convey to Mr. Boniface Ngudinzira, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation. The SEDER strongly criticized Minister Ngurinzira in this statement, labeling him a traitor. It menacingly informed him that the majority of people would not endorse the outcome of the peace negotiations. The statement quoted, "Mr. Minister, the majority of people regret being excluded from the negotiations you unilaterally conduct with the Inyenzi Inkotanyi, even though the problems you discuss concerns all Rwandans. Do you think that you alone with the Inyenzi Inkotanyi will implement the agreements resulting from these negotiations? In any case, you should consider that the agreements you will conclude must be endorsed by a referendum of the entire Rwandan people before being implemented. Therefore, you must reconsider and hear the will of the majority so that these agreements do not become a dead letter." On November 9, 1992, the SEDER issued another communiqué denouncing the protocol of the Arusha Accord, concluded on October 30, 1992, regarding power sharing in the broad-based transitional government. The communiqué stated, "The SEDER party denounces these maneuvers against democracy. It rather demands the holding of elections, allowing the people to choose their representatives. Fortunately, your sole commitment is not sufficient for the agreements to be enforceable because they must be previously approved by the competent bodies to preserve the interest of the majority of people. Considering all these observations, the SEDER party irreversibly denounces the content of the agreement concluded on October 30, 1992, concerning power sharing in the broad-based transitional government. It reaffirms that it will bring down the government in which it does not participate, and the RPF will be a part. The SEDER party seizes this opportunity to call on other parties and all democratic militants to unite to annihilate the project of constituting the broad-based transitional government according to agreements that cannot be approved." On February 19, 1993, the SEDER claimed that the Inkotanyi had killed 800 Hutu in the city of Ruhengeri, 2,000 in the Kidaho commune, 600 in the Nkumba commune, 500 in the Kinigi commune, and 800 in the Nyarutovu commune. The SEDER continued its lies by stating that in the Kinyami commune of Byumba alone, the Inkotanyi had killed 800 Hutu. After providing these false figures, the SEDER concluded that all Hutu from all political parties should mobilize to ensure their legitimate defense, meaning the massacre of Tutsis. Their statement was as follows: "You see that in the last 10 days, the Inyenzi Inkotanyi have killed more than 10,000 innocent citizens. That is 1,000 people per day. This shows that if the Hutu do not mobilize to ensure their defense, in the coming days, there will be too few Hutus left. Know that the Inyenzi Inkotanyi killed the Hutu without distinction of parties because for them, all Hutu are the same." Those who believe that those who are not members of the MDR or the PSD will be spared are mistaken. Let the horrors that have just occurred serve as a lesson to them. As the SEDER had constantly said, the majority of people must mobilize, as in 1959, if they do not want to be decimated. The SEDER party invites politicians to realize that they come from the majority and stop the intrigues that divide the majority. This is the best way to preserve the extinction of the Hutu ethnicity. On February 20th, 1993, the SEDER continued this mobilization plan to commit genocide and issued a new communiqué warning the Hutu of Cyangugu and Kibuye that the Inkotanyi would also attack them. It urged them to ensure their legitimate defense. Their statement claimed, "The SEDER party has just learned that the Inkotanyi will deploy another expedition to Rwanda from Geyeye to Cyangugu. This expedition aims to occupy the prefectures of Cyangugu and Kibuye to seize Gisenyi from Kibuye with the support of the Ugandan army, which will pass through the volcanoes." The SEDER party reiterates its call to the patriotic Rwandan people to strongly denounce the MDR, PL, PSD, and PDC parties that have engaged in coalition with the Inyenzi Inkotanyi to decimate the majority people. It appears here that the SEDER is not only targeting Tutsis but also Hutu from opposition parties considered enemies of the majority people. On February 23, 1993, the SEDER publicly condemned all individuals participating in the Arusha peace negotiation. Their statement claimed, "The SEDER party seizes this opportunity to ask the majority people to condemn with the utmost energy all these traitors and to turn a deaf ear to their sermons, which are nothing but lies manifested in their acts of betrayal." Finally, in another communiqué dated February 25, 1993, the SEDER maintained the spread of its genocidal ideology, stating, "The killings committed by Museveni's army and the Inyenzi Inkotanyi, which aim at the extermination of the majority people, are revenge for the 1959 revolution." The SEDER party renews its warning to the Hutu. Wherever there are these massacres do not concern only one specific region, but are planned throughout the country. Therefore, the Hutu must come together to fight against the enemy, aiming for their extermination. The SEDER party once again warns the Inyenzi Inkotanyi and their accomplices that the blood they continue to shed will be avenged. After signing the Arusha Peace Accords, the SEDER published even more acerbic communiques than before. In addition to urging Hutu to reject these agreements, the SEDER openly called on them to commit massacres. The first communique, released after the Rwandan government's signing of the Arusha Accord, is titled, "This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER." It resembles another text analyzed above. "You unfortunate Hutu." The SEDER addresses all categories of Hutu, ordinary citizens, military personnel, traders, ministers, state officials, and others, explaining to them that if they approve the Arusha Accords, they should prepare to leave their belongings, which will be allocated to the Inyenzi. It stated, "Hutu, you who reclaimed your property in 1959, right after the exile of the Inyenzi, leave them. They have come back to take them as stipulated in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Rwandan citizens, get ready to endure torture and pay taxes to enrich the Inkotanyi as stipulated in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Military personnel of the Rwandan Armed Forces, surrender your weapons and plow the swamps as stipulated in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Rwandan trader, you unfortunate one, get ready. These taxes will increase so that the government of which the Inyenzi are a part can pay the debts they incurred buying weapons to attack the majority people as stipulated in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Minister, leave the capital and go work in Byumba where the Inkotanyi can capture you as stipulated in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. State official, vacate your office so that it can be occupied by the Inyenzi as envisaged in the Arusha Accords. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Rwandans who travel by taxi, get ready to continue filling the pockets of the RPF if their brothers keep raising transport fees before they arrive. Here they come, and 40 francs will quadruple. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. Hutu, all of you, prepare to be treated by the Inyenzi, who will inoculate you with AIDS, as the Arusha Accords have granted health ministry with their attributions. This does not concern me. I am a member of SEDER. Hutu is still asleep. Although you are intelligent, prepare to be eliminated by the Inyenzi, as the Inyenzi Museveni did in Uganda. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. You innocents, get ready to be incessantly harassed by the Inyenzi, since they will have security, intelligence, and justice with their attributions. This does not concern me. I am a member of the SEDER. The SEDER published many other communiques in this logic to hate propaganda. The founders of the SEDER spread this ideology to the youth, notably through the Impuzamugambi militias, which established a youth SEDER section responsible for executing the genocide. Their president was Jean Damascene Bizimana, and their vice president was Jean-Baptiste Hategekimana. Check out the rest of our podcast and share them with others